Welcome back to Horn Takes. It's the breakdown. It's where we break down all the games from week past for the Texas Longhorns. Let's jump right into it. We got number 12 basketball at home against UTEP on Monday night. Chris Beard's got a lot of new faces to go with some old faces this year. Team put up 15-point win on opening night against a 20-win team from last year. Not bad. Not a bad performance. They started off really, really slow. I think with around 12 minutes to go in the first half, the score was like 9-4. Neither team seemed to be able to get in a rhythm at all. Definitely couldn't hit any shots. Lots of turnovers in that first half of the first half for both teams, really. Just some notable things from this game. I'm not going to get too in-depth about this game. This game is what it is. It's the first game of the season. Knocking the dust off. Sure, there was a lot of excitement for both teams. Ready to get the season started. But Texas was out-rebounded 29-25, which is kind of concerning. Texas did force 16 turnovers. They turned the ball over 15 times themselves. And a lot of the turnovers I felt like were from the younger guys. Arterio Morris, he struggled a little bit. Him and Dylan Mitchell, they kept trying to connect on these give and goes and lobs and stuff like that, and they just couldn't do it. I wouldn't expect that to be a problem that continues for Texas. If it is, they're not going to win a lot of games, or they're not going to be what they want to be. Newcomers to the team led the team in scoring. These are some transfers that came in. Tyrese Hunter, the big one out of Iowa State. He had 18 points last night. Really good game. That guy's a good scorer. I don't think I got a chance to watch Texas play Iowa State at all last year, so I don't really remember a lot about him. He's really good. He's going to be a good player. Definitely the point guard we need. And listen, the Texas backcourt went from kind of a liability last year to being something that could be the strength of this team. A lot of good guard play. At least good guard potential for Texas this year. The other guy, Jabari Rice, he had 14 points. He's an older guy out of New Mexico State. He's a smooth player. Really looking forward to seeing what he can do as well. I think one of the problems Texas had last year was Marcus Carr felt like he had to do everything. And I think Marcus Carr is more of a true scorer, like a shooting guard, as opposed to a point guard, where Tyrese is more of a legit point guard. So, yeah, Texas gets a 15-point win. They looked pretty slow. I mean, it was just kind of a boring game for most of the game. But then you did see some glimpses of offensive explosion, what they can do. And it's pretty dangerous. What they can do, what their potential is pretty dangerous. Thursday night, they got another warm-up against Houston Christian. And then number 2, Gonzaga comes to town. It's going to be a big test early for Texas. Then Texas has Northern Arizona, UT Rio Grande Valley. Then number 9, Creighton comes to town. So there's a couple of really big tests early for Texas basketball. They're going to figure out where they are real quick. That Gonzaga game, I believe, is this coming up Monday. Then the Creighton game is December 1st. Now, who knows where those teams will be ranked at that point, but point is, they're highly thought of teams to this point, early in the season, right? So just some initial thoughts on the team. One thing that I think is a glaring problem about this Texas basketball team is they don't really have any bigs. The closest thing they've got is Dylan Dessou. And he's more of an athletic guy. All these guys are forwards. There's not really a true center. There's not really a true big man on this team. Now, they got some guys that can play kind of big, but they're really more athletes. They're all in the, 6'9", 6'8" range, forward type guys. Just watching this game, and again, I know it's just one game, they seemed like they were really out of sync in half-court offense. It reminded me a lot of last year watching the team. They just couldn't figure out a way to penetrate, couldn't figure out a way to get open looks. So they struggled in the half court. And I think they're going to have to figure that out. I know Chris Beard wants them to run more this year, and they looked really good when they were running. But you can't run all the time. Sometimes you got to get into the half court offense. You got to be able to execute the half court offense. They really struggle getting the ball down low. So we'll see how that all turns out. They do have a lot of scorers, a lot of talent. This team, if they can figure it out and continue to play good defense, they could be a dangerous team. Are they a Final Four team? I have no idea. Probably not. There's only 4 Final Four teams out of 300 Division I teams. But it was a good win. Good to see basketball again. The Moody Center looked like a pretty cool venue, as much as you could tell on TV. Really cool little student section they got going on in there, but the fans weren't all that. I expect it to be a different atmosphere when Gonzaga comes. So we'll see. We'll let a few more games play out before we create any solid opinions. But hey, I thought it was a good win. 15 points, first game of the season. Struggling to get the rust off. They won the game. They did what they had to do. And UTEP's not a terrible team. UTEP won 20 games last year. And they got some talent. They got some good players on that team. And their coach, I don't know this guy. He coached at Abilene Christian when Abilene Christian beat Texas in the first round a few years ago. I think that's what kind of launched him into that position at UTEP. He's a wild man. He was fun to watch on the sidelines. That guy probably can't talk today. He probably has the worst headache he's ever had in his life. He screamed the entire game. Apparently him and Chris Beard are really good friends. So maybe we'll see some more UTEP Texas matchups throughout the next few years. All right, on to the big one, the football game, the Kansas State game. Number 24 was on the road. At number 13, Kansas State, who's on a roll, controls their own destiny in the Big 12. Texas going on the road where they can't win. Trying to beat a ranked team, which they've not done very well under Steve Sarkisian. Having to get a win to keep their Big 12 championship game hopes alive. And they went in there and they walked out with a win. We talked about the keys to the game on the rundown Friday where, which QB plays. I said on Friday that if Martinez plays, Texas doesn't have much of a shot. In fact, I think I said Texas has no shot if Martinez plays. So I was wrong. And the reason I was wrong is because I didn't think Texas would be able to shut down the running game of Martinez and Deuce. And they did. That was another key to the game. Could Texas has a strong running D, and could that show up against a team that really wants to run the football? All these stats about running D and pass D, they can kind of be skewed by what types of teams you're playing, right? If you're playing 95 Nebraska, you're probably going to give up a lot of rushing yards just because that's what they want to go do. If you're playing, early 2000 Texas Tech, you're probably going to hold them to under 40 yards, and that's only because they ran the ball like maybe 10 times or something the entire game. So, but K-State, they want to run the football. That's what they want to do ultimately, and they have two really good weapons. And they only combined for 125 yards. So that was a key, and Texas got that done. Next key was, can Texas offense start quickly and keep their foot on the gas? They started really quickly. They did not keep their foot on the gas. So I thought they would have to do that to win this game. I was wrong on that. But when you score 31 points in the first half, you should be able to hold on to a lead despite not playing a good offensive game in the second half. And then there was like, which Quinn Ewers are we going to get? Are we going to get Iowa State, Oklahoma State Quinn Ewers? Are we going to get Oklahoma Quinn Ewers? I think we probably got Iowa State Quinn Ewers. He wasn't great. He wasn't terrible. He didn't turn the ball over. He didn't take any sacks. He just kind of managed the game. So the big glaring thing about the game on Saturday between Texas and Kansas State was they almost let another big first half lead slip away again. 31-10 at halftime. And they come out and just lay an absolute egg in the second half for the second straight game. Oklahoma State, they scored 31 points in the first half. Scored 3 in the second half. Kansas State, 31 points in the first half, 3 in the second half. So I've seen all kinds of comments on the internet, on some of my TikTok videos, about how Steve Sarkisian he's not making adjustments at halftime. Or there's just all this conservative play calling that happens in the second half. They just want to come out and protect that lead. I think the latter has some merit. If you got a 21-point lead going into the second half, you don't want to stomp the brakes, but you don't have to be as aggressive. And I think from Steve Sarkisian's days at Alabama as the offensive coordinator, he worked for a guy that said, if you get us a big lead, we're going to protect it in the second half. Makes sense, and it works if you're the University of Alabama and you got Nick Saban sort of mentoring the defensive staff and the defensive players. And really, you're just filled with a roster full of 5 stars on defense. That might work. The other thing is, for Alabama being conservative back when Sark was the OC there, that just meant we're going to run the ball down your throat, probably rush for 200 yards and score a few more scores. For Texas, it's a little different story, right? Texas is not quite there. But I think the whole lack of adjustments, I don't believe that at all. I did not go back and watch the Oklahoma State game again, and I didn't pay attention to it the first time. But I specifically watched this K-State game, the second half of this K-State game, trying to figure out if it was lack of adjustments or if it was conservative play calling. And I got to tell you guys, I don't think it was. The reason Texas only scored 3 points in the second half against K-State was they came out unfocused. They had 0 penalties in the first half of that game. In the second half alone, they had 5 pre-snap penalties, 4 of those against the offense. It's tough to win games, tough to keep drives alive when you give up 5 yards because you can't hold your water. And listen, Kansas State, I'm sure the crowd was rowdy. But that's not a big stadium. We're not talking about Death Valley or Neyland or maybe down in College Station against the Aggies or even Texas with 107,000 folks at the right game. We're not talking that type of crowd noise. I think they just got itchy. I think something happens to that team when they go into the locker room with a big lead and they just come out and they're either pressing too hard or they just lose focus altogether. The other thing that happened in that second half, Texas got an enormous amount of pressure against Martinez for the majority of the game. But in the second half, they missed 3 sacks. And I'm not talking about a guy was back there and he got his hand on him and missed him. I'm talking about free runs to the quarterback where they just couldn't get one play. Adrian Martinez is right there. The defensive lineman is right there and just like chest bumped him out of the way like he didn't have arms. So 3 missed sacks, that's a killer. I mean, you could be looking at, anywhere from 15 yards of lost yardage on up to 25, 30 yards of lost yardage if you just execute a tackle. So let's break down the second half woes. And I think this will show that there's not a problem with the play calling and there's not a problem with trying to be too conservative. There was a huge problem Saturday with Texas just flat stepping on its dick in the second half offensively. So even defensively. Let's talk about it. So Texas defense does a great job. They come out, they kick the ball off to Kansas State. They get the ball right back for the offense. The first offensive series of the second half, Texas has 2 false starts. They actually make a play to convert a 3rd and long. And Worthy gets stuck pretty hard. Good play by that Kansas State defensive back. Got his head right on the ball. Ball comes out. Kansas State's got the ball. Really good shape. Texas side of the field. Crowd's going crazy. Very first play of that drive. I believe it was the first play of that drive. Kansas State busts a long run. But they're holding. And then the same guy that was holding gets a personal foul penalty after the game. So they get backed up to basically midfield. It's 1st and 35. Very next play, Texas gets a personal foul. Get them a first down. Bailed them out. 1st and 35. Not only did they give up a big play on that 1st and 35, but then they committed a personal foul, which took them half the distance to the goal. A couple plays later, they're in for a touchdown. So then Texas gets the ball back. And this drive's okay. It starts out pretty good. They get 2 third down conversions. Then we get a false start. Kills the drive. Punt it. Third defensive series is a wash. I think they force a punt. Then the third offensive series for Texas comes. False start. Started off false start. 1st and 15. Texas ultimately gets it to 3rd and short. And then they run directly. And this is where you could say you got some conservative play calling or probably not a lack of adjustment necessarily, but they get up there in a really tight formation, a lot of big bodies. I believe it was 3rd and 2. And they run directly into a 9-man box. He gets stuffed. He loses like 2 yards. So they punt it. Then here's where the defense starts to have their troubles. Fourth defensive series, we miss a sack. We miss a fumble recovery opportunity on a really long play where we strip the ball. Then the quarter flips, I believe it's the very first play of the fourth quarter. Just a complete coverage meltdown. Results in a long play for 6. Makes it a 7-point game. Texas ends up getting a field goal in their fourth drive. And that was one of 2 drives in the whole second half where there was no penalties. Then your fifth defensive series, miss sack. They give up a conversion on 3rd and 9. Another miss sack. Face mask. And that allows K-State to get a field goal to cut it to 7 again. Now we're sitting at around, I think there's 3 or 4 minutes left in the game. Fifth offensive series for Texas at the half. They just go 3 and out. They run the ball 2 times, miss a block on the edge on what probably, if they get that block, they probably pick up the first down. Might have scored, actually. Everything else was buttoned up really good. Just missed one block. Really good play, though, I'd say, by the Kansas State defensive back to throw him for a loss on 3rd. Punt the ball. And here's where it gets really interesting. Here's where I'm losing my mind as a fan, right? I'm like, oh, shit. The whole second half, I've been sitting there and thinking to myself, is this team really going to do it again? Are they really going to blow another big lead like that? Like, this can't be a thing that just continues to happen. At some point, we've got to win one of these games, right? That's the optimistic side of me. The pessimistic side of me is like, we are absolutely about to do this again. Just everything piling on top of each other. So this is the drive that's going to decide it, right? The 6th defensive series. So they get another forced fumble that they missed the recovery on. 2 Texas dudes take themselves out, knock the ball out of bounds. Then they have some really good defensive plays. We got them 4th and 6. Martinez scrambles out to his right side, throws across his body. Really good coverage. Perfect play. You know what it reminded me of? It reminded me a lot of the pass Donovan Smith made on 4th and about the same. Late in the game against Texas to keep a drive alive where they ultimately went down and scored. Same type of deal. Really good coverage, thrown across your body, and just somehow throw an absolute dime. They convert on that 4th down. Then finally, we knock the ball loose again. Jalen Ford lands on it to seal the deal. But that was a lot of fuckery in the second half of that game. Texas has got to figure, and again, I don't know what it is. I don't think it's adjustments. I absolutely do not think much changes from the first half to the second half in the way they want to call the game and their game plan. I don't even think they get all that conservative. What does conservative even mean? For a lot of people, it means, oh, we're just trying to run the ball and eat the clock. Like I've seen people comment that. You got 2 NFL running backs. Why wouldn't you want to run the ball, eat the clock? So I don't buy that whole piece either. The team just is absolutely not focused. If I'm Steve Sarkisian, I'm bringing in I don't know. I'm bringing in therapists or something to try to figure out how to get this team focused for a second half. If Texas doesn't step on their dicks in the second half of almost every game this year, they're a 1-loss team right now. Because I don't think they did that against Alabama. But they absolutely did it against Texas Tech. They absolutely did it against Iowa State. They absolutely did it against Oklahoma State. And they absolutely did it against K-State. So they're 2-2 in games where they step on their dicks in the second half. If they would fix that, they'd be 4-0 in those games. So TCU's coming to town. TCU starts slow, makes up ground in the second half. Texas typically starts fast, fizzles out after halftime. Is this finally the week where Texas can play a complete game? They played one against Oklahoma. And again, I don't know what the mental breakdown is there. Focus is all a mental thing. I don't know if it's because they're on the road and maybe it's just unfamiliar surroundings. I don't know if it's the crowd noise. I don't know what it is. But there's something that's just a little off when that team goes into halftime with a big lead. They don't come out the same way they went in. And if Steve Sarkisian can figure that part out, Texas can absolutely run the table. Absolutely. And I'm talking bowl game. I'm talking Texas can absolutely win their last 3 games, win the Big 12 championship game, and go win the Sugar Bowl if Steve Sarkisian can figure out how to bring the same team out for the second half that he took in after the first half. Mentally. All right. We'll talk about a bunch of games on Friday. We'll be back Friday. Subscribe to the podcast. Tell your friends about the podcast. Rate the podcast. You can find me on TikTok at Horn Takes Podcast. You can send me an email at horntakespodcast@gmail.com. Send me your questions, comments, concerns.